Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. I believe I've got an iPad mini inside here. I think it's a 4th gen mini. I've been waiting on one of those for quite some time. If it is, it should be running iOS 9. At least I'm hopeful for that. The thumbnail may or may not give that away. But let's get this thing opened up so that I can see if I got myself a cool device or not. You guys probably already know. Okay, so this is not an iPad mini. It is actually an iPad Air. Feels like a 2nd gen, and it looks like an iPad Air 2nd gen. I do remember buying this. It was quite some time ago. This thing should be running iOS 8. It was some really sketchy listing photos, but we're going to find out here. It looks actually like the iPad is dead, and it's pretty dirty, so that gives me an excuse to get this thing cleaned up while we let it charge. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. All right, the iPad has enough power to turn on, and you can see we have Slide to set up. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to fly through the setup screen here on our iPad Air 2nd gen. And once we make it to that home screen, we should see right away which version of iOS we have. Hopefully it activates. Should not be any problems here, although it may take a few tries. We'll just keep spamming that try again button until it works. Usually it takes the device a few minutes to actually get the date and time correct, which is what it requires to set up. So no Apple ID, which is fantastic, and we are not going to add our own. I don't know when Apple added landscape mode for setup, but that would make recording this portion of the video a lot easier. Touch ID is working. Okay, well let me just skip that. Thanks, Apple. No Touch ID, no passcode. We will use Siri. Automatically send, share with developers. Moment of truth, which iOS version do we have? And it's looking good, guys. It looks like iOS 8. 15 is available, so let's see what it tells us about that. So that's going to be a 1.6 gigabyte file. And luckily for us, we have to connect it to a computer to update, so it's not going to let us do that over the air, which is a really good sign because we don't want that to ever happen. So, all right, now this is the real moment of truth. iOS version 8.1.3. This is a 16 gig model, so it is base configuration, but finding an Air 2 on iOS 8 has proved to be somewhat of a challenge for me. There were actually a bunch of these floating around about a year, maybe 2 years ago. Some seller had like 10 of them. I'm assuming they were from like a school or a business that had just never used them, so they were selling them, and they were like $80 for an iPad Air 2 on iOS 8. So pretty good deal at the time. I didn't pick one up just because I had so many other devices, but now I can finally add one to the collection. Really cool device. This thing, when it launched, this was really a breakthrough for Apple. It was such a thin device. I mean, even today, this thing still feels incredibly thin. Actually, you know what I want to do? I want to compare this to my iPad Pro and see which one is thinner, because it actually feels like this iPad Air 2nd gen might be a little bit thinner than my M2 iPad Pro. So we're going to lay those next to each other here. Ooh, it's actually very close. Let me see if I can show that on camera. So I'm going to have to flip it so my camera is facing down. And then if we go all the way down to the table, you guys can see just how close these iPads are to each other. So my phone is literally sitting on the table. That's as low as we can go. These are essentially the same thickness. That is amazing. iPad Air 2 from 2014. iPad Pro M2, I think from 2023. I don't actually know when that came out, but they are just the same thickness. And they actually appear to be essentially the same size as well, so that's actually pretty interesting. The iPad Pro is a little bit longer there, and it is a little bit wider as well. So the 11-inch iPad Pro is a little bit bigger when you compare them just like that. But enough talk with that new iPad. That's not what we want to look at here on this channel. We want the old stuff, and that's what we've got here. We got an iPad Air 2nd gen. This is a super unique device, and I'm going to try to explain why without sounding like a complete nerd, but this thing came out in 2014 and it changed a lot for the iPad. It brought the Apple A8X chip, which interestingly is a tri-core CPU. This thing has 3 cores, not 2, not 4, it has 3. As far as I know, this is the only CPU that's ever been like mass produced that has 3 cores. I don't know why Apple did that. They went from dual core to quad core in the iPhone. And obviously they did that with the Mac as well. But basically every CPU generation ever has gone from dual core to quad core to 6 core. Like no one ever uses the odd numbers except for Apple. They went with a 3-core CPU here. So the A8X 3-core, 1.5 gigahertz. It's got a really powerful GPU. Let me see if I can find the graph that they showed at their keynote. When they introduced this, they showed a graph, I believe, of the CPU and the GPU performance, and it was significant, the changes that this thing had compared to the other generations. And we're just getting a bunch of like actual keynote application graphs. So let's see if I just do iPad Air 2. Maybe I'll find it later while I'm editing the video and I can throw it up on screen. Maybe it wasn't the iPad Air 2nd gen, but I swear it was because this thing was a screamer in terms of performance. And look how thin it is. I still cannot believe it. I don't know if it's because it's got the rounded edges that it feels so thin. I mean, it's obviously lighter than my iPad Pro, but this thing is a real beauty to hold. And it's in space gray. I believe it also came in gold. Maybe not. Maybe it's just space gray and silver, but I thought there was a gold color for the iPad Air 2nd gen. It brought Touch ID to the iPad, so for whatever reason, the iPad Air 1st gen, which launched essentially alongside the iPhone 5S and featured the same CPU, did not get Touch ID. So they saved that here for the iPad Air 2nd gen. And I know I'm a little distracted here, but look how clean this display is. There are like no scratches. There's still some dirt up here. I'm not quite going to get all of that off, but it looks super nice. There's really no scratches, maybe just a few tiny ones. This is the last flagship iPad to not have a camera bump. Actually, that could be wrong. The iPad Pro 12.9 inch did not have a camera bump, but the 9.7 inch did because it got 12 megapixels. But this thing launched with iOS 8, and this thing got updates all the way up to iOS 15. So that might be tied for the longest run ever for iOS updates on an iPad. I'm not sure who's currently in the lead for that, but iOS 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, that is a really good showing for updates on the iPad. And this iPad Air 2nd gen, even on iOS 15, performs really, really well. I've actually got one coming on the way. It was like the cheapest iPad Air 2nd gen I could find on eBay. I bought it. It was like $40 or something. I'm going to do a review on that and just see how good is the iPad Air 2 here in 2024, because it's a really capable device. It certainly was for a long time. It was sold for a long time, and I know a lot of people that got one of these. If this thing had Apple Pencil support, which the Apple Pencil was not introduced yet, it came out a year later with the iPad Pro 1st gen. But if this thing got Apple Pencil support, this would really be a really nice device, and I think a lot of people would still be using them. So what else can I say? I mean, it's a fantastic device. I guess I could show you guys the video quality. I think it's got 1080p 30 FPS. We can switch to that right now. Here is the look at the iPad Air 2nd gen. This was the first iPad to feature an upgrade in megapixels since the iPad 3rd gen. So the 3rd gen, 4th gen, 5th gen, even the 1st gen iPad Air all had a 5 megapixel lens. This is now an 8 megapixel lens. I think this can do slow motion video. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it does. Here we can take a look at an iPhone XR. This one's running iOS 12, as you can see there. And the colors appear to be okay. It's kind of hard to tell on the screen. Everything looks a little grainy. Focus seems like it's a little off. I kind of have to tap to focus on everything. Hopefully the audio doesn't sound too bad. The microphone is up here, so if I talk right here, it probably sounds much better. So if I'm standing back here recording, it doesn't actually sound that good. Hopefully it comes out okay. We'll see how that looks on the computer screen for you guys. So let's go ahead and switch back here to the primary setup. So there you guys got to see the video and hear the audio quality. Hopefully you got to hear that. Sometimes I have to edit in my own audio, but you'll definitely see the video quality if I can get that transferred to my computer. So when this thing was launched, it really revolutionized the iPad lineup. For the first time, Apple had a product that I believe was thinner than the iPhone. I think this was the first iPad that was actually thinner than an iPhone. Although that could be wrong because the iPhone 6 is the thinnest iPhone ever. So these are actually really close. Hard to say which one's thicker. I could lay them down, but you've got the camera bump here, so it's a little bit hard to tell. You could dig into the numbers there if you really want to know, and this thing just died. It was at 5%. This battery must not be doing very well. So now I'm going to have to let that charge again. All right, charged up once again. Here is our iPad Air 2nd gen. Super fast device here on iOS 8. It does everything flawlessly. And I mean, even up through like iOS 12 and honestly iOS 15 is pretty smooth on this device thanks to how future-proof it was when Apple launched it back in 2014 with its triple core Apple A8 CPU, 2 gigabytes of RAM. This was the first iOS device to feature 2 gigs of RAM, and it really served this iPad well. Allowed it to maintain its software support through iOS 15, as well as be a super smooth device that does everything you could possibly throw at it. And it was just a fantastic product that Apple launched. They really hit it out of the park with this. If I had to rank iPads, I think this would be S tier because the iPad Air 2 was such a good product. And to have one here on iOS 8 is very cool. Super happy to finally get one of these. I know they're not that hard to find, but I have not been able to find one since I've been collecting Apple products. And it makes me happy to be able to share this one with you guys through YouTube here. So real quick before we go, let's check out those iOS 8 wallpapers because we do not get to see them very often. We've got the dynamic wallpapers here. Not my favorite, but they don't look too bad here on this iPad display. I don't know why there's such a big space right here. Seems like there should be something else, but there's not. And then we've got the iOS 8 still wallpapers, which look really nice. We've got a little carryover from iOS 7, and iOS 7's got some super clean wallpapers as well. And then we've got some new ones up here for iOS 8. I don't remember what the stock, I guess it was this one. This was the stock iPad Air 2 iOS 8 wallpaper, but some really cool ones here. We got some mountains there and some winter trees. Let's find something that's going to complement the black display of the iPad, and I think this is going to do it. This looks epic. I usually don't pick dark wallpapers because sometimes they don't show up very well on camera, but check out this lock screen here. This looks so clean on our iPad Air 2nd Gen. I'm trying not to get the reflections of the lights in there, but this is really a gorgeous device. So there you guys have it. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.